Hello, and welcome to the June 2025 meeting of Triangle Association of Freelancers. Our guest this evening is Troy Brownfield, the editor of Humpty Dumpty and Jack and Jill magazines. Troy, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I wanted to start our conversation by kind of talking about your childhood a little bit. This is kind of how we start these things with other writers and editors. And I was curious if you had any childhood literary inspirations, if there were any books or authors that were especially meaningful to you when you were a kid.
Oh, that's an interesting question. And I find you usually have to pay people to talk about your childhood, but you know, um, I let's see. Um, I was a reader from early. I found comics early, but I was also really into um, kids' versions of classic novels and so forth. I was big into mystery stuff from early on. My first favorite writer was probably Poe, and I started reading Stephen King when I was 10. and and
That's a
so
little young for King.
well, it's kind of funny because I had a couple of scary Keystone memories as a child that were unconnected. That were like I remember seeing the Carrie newspaper ad for the movie where she's covered in blood in the newspaper ad when they used to have the big newspaper ads for films, the actual movie section of the newspaper. And I remember seeing that and it's scaring the crap out of me. And then a little later, my grandmother, who was ill-advised a lot, let me watch Salem's Lot when the miniseries was on. And so the scene with Danny Glick outside the window scared the bejesus out of me. And then before the Empire Strikes Back, they had the original trailer for The Shining with the blood coming out of the elevator. And these to me were disconnected things until I was looking at my grandma's bookshelf one day, and in a row on her bookshelf, Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, and it was all the same guy. And I'm like, this stuff that scared the crap out of me three different times was this guy. I've got to read this. And so that was the that part of it. But no, I was very big in comics, and I wanted to write early. I was just really interesting. I was just really interested in the idea of writing, and the first thing was comic kind of stuff. Writing, little drawing pictures and putting word bubbles with them and so forth. And then I was in a program fifth and sixth grade, kind of like a intro to honors program kind of thing, where you did creative writing weekly. And that was an opportunity to actually do it kind of within a classroom structure. The instruction wasn't really good, but it was a chance to do it on a regular basis and kind of feel your way through stuff and learn. And then I, just took the opportunity to take more writing and journalism classes. I was started getting on the school paper. I was when I was in junior high, high school, college, I was always on the school paper working. And that just gives you a lot of fundamentals, obviously, and teaches you a lot about self-editing and brevity, something I'm better at writing than talking. But it was just one of those things where um, collectively over a long period of time, the stuff that I was interested in was all anchored in writing, and understanding early on. I love movies and understanding, the screenwriter did something. Harlan Ellison told a story that once he was on a movie set for he had worked on the script, and there was a studio tour came by, and somebody asked him what he did, and he said, "I'm the writer." And they said, "So you write down what the actors say?" And I thought that was kind of hilarious, but it does go a lot toward this thing of it's kind of a mystery to people, and you kind of have to figure out, where it comes from and find your way into those writing disciplines. It never stops being mysterious. I think everybody probably agree with that because
Oh,
um,
yeah, you never stop learning. I mean, you think you know, but you don't know.
yeah, yeah. So I guess that was the and I Went to college as an English major, radio, TV, film minor. Got at Indiana State University, and I ended up taking an offer to go to grad school at ISU. I was a TA and did English with focus in creative writing for my master's. And I started working in the publishing industry out of grad school, but really started on the early end of the internet boom, doing my own website and writing for comic-based websites after that, writing stories because I'd written about comics and so forth in the college paper, and so I had material. And I wrote a story about the death of Bob Kane, who co-created Batman. And they wrote it on I wrote it on my website, and the Indianapolis Star picked it up. They contacted me and said, "Hey, we saw your piece. Can we pay you for it?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And but it gave me an in. And I was already building up this stuff online, but at that time it was still weird to a lot of the publishers. The internet was kind of like over here, and real stuff, quote unquote, was over here. But then I had this, you know, Indianapolis Star big story, and they started paying me to write other stuff and interview other comic people. And there was an alt weekly in Indy called Nouveau News Weekly, so I would interview, musicians and artists and stuff for that, and got a lot of clips between that and the internet, and that became my way um, at a certain point. And then in 2004, I started, well, let me back up. 2002, I started writing for New Type USA magazine, which is an anime magazine. And I wrote about 100 stories for them in 2 years and a couple of covers. And again, the expansion of credits allow me, and I went to the Mid-Ohio Comic Con and ran into a writer I knew from online. And he said, "Man, you should be writing for Newsarama," which is one of the big comic sites. And I said, "Oh, that's great. Who should I talk to?" And there was another guy there that wrote for Newsarama, and he took me over and introduced me. And he's like, "Yeah, you email Matt Brady." And I emailed Matt, and within a week, I was writing for Newsarama, and I worked for them as a writer and a columnist for 7 years. The Newsarama stuff opened me up to writing for Topps Trading Card Company, which I still do. Writing for it introduced me to a lot of the comic editors that I would later write for. Which at that point I'd kind of reconciled the fact that comics is very hard to break into. I probably wouldn't write for comics. And then, but after writing about them for years in a very, very public place, I mean, Newsarama like won an Eisner and was mentioned in Entertainment Weekly and stuff like that. So we had an audience, and my name had just enough within the circles to actually allow me to pitch, you know, and Topps came out of that. The Topps was looking for someone to write a trading card series based on the Halo video game around
Mhm.
2005, and they called Matt, who was the editor, and offered it to him because he'd done work for them before. And he said, "Oh, I've never played Halo. I don't have time, but Troy has done it." And they called me, and basically the questions were, "Have you played Halo?" "Yes." "All the way through?" "Yes." "Have you played Halo 2?" "Yes." "All the way through?" "Yes." "You're our guy." And so I wrote the Halo trading cards, which segued into the Skylanders and doing other stuff like that. And then in 2019, uh, or 20, well, it was 2018, 2019, they came to me about The Mandalorian. And I've been writing Star Wars cards for Topps ever since. I've written about 2,500 Star Wars cards. So I'm all over the place.
Well,
But
tell us how you came to join the Saturday Evening Post organization, and what ultimately led you to kind of heading the kids magazines.
um, I taught for my day job all vacillated between publishing and teaching. I for that company I worked for out of grad school, I worked there for 2.5 years, and I worked for a couple other places. In 2004, I was approached about a teaching job at St. Mary of the Woods College in Indiana, and I taught there for 7 years, and then went back to publishing for a little while, and um, I did some more teaching, and at that point, 2018, um, I was kind of done with teaching. There was a lot of stuff going on in teaching that was worse now, but there
Yeah.
was the writing was on the wall with a lot of that in a lot of ways, and I said, I'm not going to do this, and I went to look for new stuff, and the very first thing I saw was the Saturday Evening Post was hiring a staff writer, which heretofore I didn't know that the Post was in Indianapolis. I assumed, like many people, that it was somewhere else. It was in Philadelphia for a long time, but actually been in Indiana since the early 70s in Indianapolis. And so I applied to it. It was the first thing I applied to, and I heard back pretty quickly. And the school year had ended in June, and I took my wife and kids and I went to Great Wolf Lodge, and the editor at the time, Steve Sloan, called me while we were at Great Wolf Lodge to say, "Hey, do you want to be a staff writer?" And I said, "Sure." And so that was June 14th, 2018 was my first day. So I just had my 7 year anniversary. I started as a staff writer, became senior editor, and took over the kids in 2022, and then also became the executive editor of the Post in 2023.
That's awesome. Tell us about what are your primary responsibilities as the editor of Jack and Jill and Humpty Dumpty?
Well, um, I, the long and short of it is I oversee everything. Brian Sanchez, who is our art director, is the nuts and bolts guy. Layout is his thing. He's done it for 14 years, I think Brian's been at doing the kids magazines at the Post. So we have a really good shorthand about what Brian does and what I do. And the look and feel uh, resides with Brian, and the editorial resides with me. There's some long-standing departments that we have that are pretty well covered. We have an animal feature in each one. I should pause here and say Humpty Dumpty has an audience of 2 to 6 year olds, and the stated audience for Jack and Jill is 7 to 12. And we realize those are both incredible spans. At one point in the kind of distant past, there was another kids magazine that broke up the demo a little further. But the kind of comfortable thing about 2 to 6 is that you can insert picture kind of things, drawing kind of things, puzzles, and light reading features that would be good for that pre-K to K, maybe first grade group. Jack and Jill, 7 to 12. We have some heavy reading features like author interviews with YA authors. That's a regular feature. Interviews with kids who are doing extraordinary things. And I write a comic that's 2 pages that's in every Jack and Jill. We've been doing it for 3 years. The artist is Merrill Rainey, who's a children's book author and illustrator, and he does the Humpty covers as well. So that kind of stuff gives you a little bit of an indication of the content. But we sit down at the end of one cycle after everything ships, and we determine we have some regular writers covering those regular features, and then we determine what other stuff we're going to do. And we have some regular departments with puzzles and whatnot, but we also take a variety of different kind of submissions. In the issue that just came out, the July and August issue, I had a French writer pitch me on a story about kids in Bangladesh in a traveling circus. And he pitched me with the full piece and photos and everything. I'm like, this is great. We never see anything like this. Let's use it. And so we
Yeah.
created some room in Jack and Jill to put that, because we didn't think that was something that the kids would have seen otherwise. And it wasn't really right for the Post, because it was very much kid focused, talking about the kid performers. And so that was just something out of nowhere that we ran. We also try to run stuff from kids when we can. We have stuff that they submit their pictures of themselves holding up their artwork. That's kind of a staple of both magazines. That's been a staple for years. I mean, since there's copies from the 70s that have that. So we kind of keep that. But I also just picked up a poem by a 13-year-old who submitted it, which is going to run in the November, December. But I have a stack right now on my desk of submissions that were all blind submissions. There's stuff that I pulled out for the next few issues that I'm just rolling out, um, one or two at a time, just as we have room.
Are those through the transom queries or are those things you've already acquired?
Those were just straight up queries that came through the editor's mailbox.
Okay.
Some of those were conventional mail, and a couple of them were electronic mail. And I don't know if there was a new writer's market listing or if it was because we updated the writer's guidelines on the website, but I've gotten a lot of queries in the last 2 weeks, like more than normal. I usually get queries weekly through the email, but last few days we've been getting more. And
Mm.
I'm not sure if something external prompted that or if it was just us updating guidelines.
Sure.
In the chat, I did put my email address. That's my direct post address. And then the website address for the kids, which is US Kids Magazines. That's the kind of corporate name that Jack and Jill and Humpty exist under, is US Kids Magazines. So uskidsmags.com is the website. And when you go to the website, it's got a landing page for both Jack and Humpty on the front. But you notice there's a red box at the bottom. The red box in the bottom contains a call out for writer's guidelines. And if you click there, it gives you all the information on the guidelines for the particular magazines in terms of what we look for. We accept a lot of different things, but there's a limited amount per issue just by dint of the size, because they're not very big, that we can accept. So we have, there's poetry submissions, there's short story submissions, which exist in a couple of different forms I'll come back to in a minute. There's feature ideas, puzzles. We have puzzle pages, and so sometimes people will submit that they have a Sudoku, a word search, something, and we'll, give like maybe a nominal fee for doing something like that if we decide to pick it up, because it saves us from making it. Because we create a lot of puzzles and so forth internally. And Andy Hollenbeck, who I think has met with your group before, and
Yes.
who's senior managing editor, and when we proofread, we print galleys like 11 by 17 of all three magazines, Jack, Humpty, and the Post, and we sit at the big conference table that they've had for like 100 years, and seriously, like 100 years. And Andy always yells at me if I do the puzzles before he gets to do them, because we do every puzzle to make sure that they work and make sure that there's nothing missing. We found a Sudoku. We had to move the 5 last time because the 5 got laid out in the wrong spot. So it's why we do it. But we have this. You can read the list on the website that gives some specificity to some of the length and some of the different things. And um, I would say, in terms of language with Jack and Jill, um, I would shoot a little above the lower end in terms of 7 to 12. Maybe expand the vocabulary a little bit, but not talk down. And I think that's kind of important in the 7 to 12. Like Humpty 2 to 6, it's going to be a lot of simple language, simple sentences, and so forth. But we do have readers that are still 11, 12, still reading the magazines, and we hear from them. They'll write or email. The girl that submitted the poem that I just bought was a 13-year-old reader who'd grown up reading it, and she wanted to try submitting something.
You
And
just made her day.
it was great.
And maybe you inspired a new writer.
Well, what was cool about it was a funny story poem, about a missing sock. And it turned out, it was all the places she was looking for the sock, and it turned out the dog had it. And I immediately saw the art, in my head. I'm like, oh, this is perfect for art. And so we can run the poem, and the kid is able to have their poem published, but it's also going to look good on the page. It had kind of the visual hook. I mean, I could see the dog with the sock in its mouth in the art, which was helpful. But yeah, we get a lot of interesting ideas, and sometimes they just don't work, and sometimes they're really outside the box, like that kid circus from Bangladesh that surprise us, and like that's too cool to pass up, that kind of thing.
Are both magazines bi-monthly, 6 issues a year?
Yes, both are bi-monthly, same page count. They're 36 pages, no ads. We don't have ads in the kids' books.
What is the circulation, Troy?
That is a fantastic question because we have a kind of large digital circulation, and Post is 250,000 subscribed at this point, and
Mhm.
the kids' magazines are lower, but they're pretty substantial. I don't have an updated
That's
number
good.
for this year, or else I would tell you. But they are sold through our subscription, but there's also a lot of subscription services, and they're available digitally. So in
Yeah.
terms of total penetration circulation, I couldn't tell you off the top.
Um, who is your biggest competition, would you say? I'm thinking highlights, maybe.
Yeah, I almost made a
Sorry.
yeah, I almost made an appropriate joke because like those blanks at highlights. Uh, no, but the thing you had to remember, I think, about the post to Humpty and Jack and Jill is that we are either online or subscription. We are not newsstand.
Right.
Um,
None,
and
the kids' magazines are not newsstand.
right.
Okay.
They're entirely subscription and digital. And you'll notice that like highlights is very much on the newsstand, which bedevils me at CVS and so forth.
Yeah.
Because I see it and like, yeah. But this many years ago, um, they moved the post and so forth into that model because I think a lot of people don't realize that it's incredibly expensive to maintain newsstand presence. And the Post Society at the end of the day is a nonprofit.
Mhm.
And so even though we have these magazines and we have jobs and we,
Mhm.
the three books that come out, the organization is a nonprofit. And there are things that are done in terms of our material that expressly allows us and is required for nonprofit status, like all the health and healthy eating and so forth articles that are in the Post um, are pursuant to our nonprofit status. The fact that we have the kids' health pages and exercises and so forth in both Humpty and Jack and Jill. That text is written by Wendy Braun, who is a RN and who has written for the Post for decades. But we maintain that and the reading and the cultural components and so forth because that is also pursuant to our educational mission. But that is also some of the stuff why we're in nonprofit. Why also we don't put ads in the kids' magazines because we want it to be completely the experience for the reader, not, and also buy this. But
Right.
but it does mean that, the decision was made way before I joined they would go off the newsstand. I think people would be blown away by the cost of maintaining like a facing at Barnes and Noble. It's
Oh, yeah.
crazy.
It's not cheap.
No.
Let's talk a little bit about fee and rights, Troy,
Uh-huh.
for the kids' mag specifically.
Um, Everything varies by length. Rights can go a variety of ways. Um, we can do first serial, we can do work for hire, or we can do one time. We're flexible. A lot of it depends on what the writer is comfortable with. Sometimes writers are fine just making the sale. But I don't want to, there's certain circumstances where things that we might envision maybe running again later as a pickup. Because sometimes you just have that hole and you have stuff available that, like, if it's an evergreen kind of thing, you can always put it back in. And, so we might pay something like that to retain rights to it. But we tend to work with the writers and see what their expectation is of that. Fees vary by what the item is. If you're pitching a full feature with photos, that's going to be more, but it's not going to be necessarily the same for every person. I might change it based on degree of difficulty and so forth. I might change it, but
So
you
you
know,
have some, as the editor, you have some flexibility.
yeah, I have a lot of discretion on that, and there's the paid departments the people write regularly are set, and
Right.
those factor into the budget. And so, I hate to just give the answer of it depends because I don't want anybody to waste their
Well,
time.
well, a
Um,
lot of magazines are like that. But
yeah, like
if you don't mind me revealing, the column that I do for you is around 400 words, and the pay is $200 per column, and it's a lot of fun to write. I really enjoy it. So the money's not fantastic, but it's fine for the amount of work involved, and I just like the idea of writing for Jack and Jill.
yeah, which I appreciate. And my son, Connor, who's a college senior, um, he writes a couple of the things in the kids magazines that he gets his very nominal fee. That we joke about how nominal it is. For he writes the animal things and the Let's Explore, for example. But Connor actually did a where when you have the day when you're in school where you get to go shadow a job. And in 2019, when he was still in middle school, he did a job shadow at the Post. That's where he picked to go. And hilariously enough, I wasn't even there. I was in DC doing something for the Post that morning. And I got back in the afternoon, so he was there. But Connor did the job shadow, and we had our editorial meeting that afternoon. He went and he pitched a story, and they bought it. And so I'm like, oh, right on. Good work, kid. And then, but after that, the bug was clearly there, and he pitched and did some other stuff. Connor and I co-wrote a story together. Connor and Kyle, my other son who just graduated high school, wrote a story together on the best horror film since 2000. And Connor has I needed somebody to cover those small areas at that one point, and I was like, man, why doesn't Connor just do it? And I said, do you have an interest in this? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, congratulations. This is your deadline. Don't mess it up. And he's been doing, and a couple of the writers, Sally Bodette, who writes the young author interview, she was one of our interns, and Gabriella Fine, who writes the Superstar Kids interview, she was one of our interns. Because we have college and high school interns sometimes, but they were both college interns, and they did such a great job as interns that I hired them after the internship to take on those features because we were in a transition from who had written the Superstar Kids one, and then we had just created the author one based on something that Sally had done. So I said, "Do you want to do this regularly?" And so it was, there's a lot of organic stuff in terms of who got what for the regulars. And there's enough of an opportunity that someone has a great idea, like your column, the What's the Difference is a great idea for a kids magazine. And so it was a very easy decision to say, let's go with Don's idea for the span that you pitched it on because it just worked for us. And it's
Well,
like
like I said, I'm having a blast with it. This is which issue is this? This is the March April issue, which I think has my first "What's the Difference" thing in it. So it goes to show you, very colorful cover, usually with a kid on it. Troy.
yeah. Yeah, the Jack and Jill covers are all photo covers, and they have a kid. And we're seasonal in terms of themes. We usually have a theme for each issue. They're not announced, they're kind of internal.
Mhm,
But generally, September, October is always going to be fall, Halloween. November, December is always going to be holiday.
mhm,
Um, Jan, Feb's always going to be winter. But May, June is always going to be art because that's when our cover contest is. We have an annual cover contest that gets thousands of entries where kids submit covers for both Jack and Humpty. And
mhm.
it is a big job. But that's our busiest time is working on that because we have gotten thousands of submissions.
Sure.
And part of the deal is we post them all. We post them all on our Facebook page, everyone that comes in, so that people can see the kids' art. And it takes a lot. And but then May, June, in addition to having all the winners, like the first, second, third place in Reader's Choice, which is voted on the Facebook page, we also usually make that issue art related. So an extra note, which is on the website and the writer's guidelines, but we need to have that seasonal material. If you have a seasonal idea, like a winter idea, spring idea, something that needs to be pitched, probably 6 months ahead of time. Um, because right now, June 25th, we are halfway through the cycle of the September, October issue. And I wrote because we have a listen again feature that's like a classic album that's in every issue of the Post. And I wrote the Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd a bit today that will be in the September, October issue. Like I just wrote it. So
Is that column open to freelancers or is that mostly in-house?
yeah, that's just me.
Uh,
I
that's a
would
good gig,
entertain
dude.
I would entertain the idea. If we opened it, we're talking about opening up different column ideas. Um, with the Post, we literally were just talking about it this morning. Um, like what new stuff we might do in the new year. So, a sneaky column. But no, the listen again is just a small section within the Post-it section, which are all small bits. And that only started last year. It was Mandy Bixler, the art director for the Post, kind of threw it out as an idea. And I said, well, that's mine. And and I usually do an album that's either 40 or 50 years old, depending on what
Yeah.
grabs me for the thing. And um, I had just done Born in the USA's 40th for the website. So I wanted to wait and do Born to Run's 50th on the website in August. And so I wanted to pick something different for September, October, and went with, Pink Floyd, which was all the process that I went through for that. Just
Well,
about that long. I'm like, oh, wish you were here. Never mind.
you've really given us an idea of what you're looking for the kids magazines, and it looks like it's really broad as far as what you would take a look at. What do you not need? What kind of ideas do you not want? And what have you found to be the most common mistakes made by writers reaching out for the first time who want to write for you?
Um, it's hard to say because we have those animal departments, and I would have said don't pitch an animal thing, but you pitched an animal thing. And it worked independently of the department. And when I say that, we have amazing animals and Humpty and wacky wildlife, and sometimes it's one pages, sometimes it's two, usually with a photo of an animal, maybe a couple of photos, and then some facts about that animal. Humpty is usually a little broader, maybe a little more obvious, and Jack and Jill is usually something a little maybe weirder for the older kids. But I usually try to tie it into the theme. So we did um, kind of a Italian Roman theme in July and August because I was training for a theme, and I'm like July, August. Oh, Julius Augustus. We'll just do so the landmarks that they talked about were Roman, and we did for the animals in Humpty, it was the Italian wolf, and Jack and Jill was the long-eared Sardinian bat. Um, so, but we have those regular things. So I wouldn't necessarily think an animal thing unless you had an angle. But with Don's column right now, we're pretty well animal covered.
Right.
But things about interesting places are always good. Things about if you have um like maybe a new trend that not like to be super trendy, but I'd say like if there was a new kids activity that was gaining momentum that you knew about, like we've had interviewed kids that do the Ninja Warrior competitions in the under
Mhm.
10 divisions, which is interesting, or something that like a kid is. Um, we had an interview with Sky Brown, who's an Olympic skateboarder. Um, she was 13 in her first Olympics and medaled. So that was a really cool thing. But that just kids doing interesting stuff in the community works well. But I'm open to different ideas. I'm always looking for new stuff. Excuse me. And it's hard for me to say, you know, and I know this is great. This is what you love to hear as a freelancer. It's hard for me to know what I'm going to want from day to day. But I've been on the freelance side a lot, so I get it the non-specificity is annoying. But I do look for great ideas or fun stuff. The thing that it should mean something, but it should be fun. And I look for that. Like as a kid,
So we're kind of educating our readers in a very fun way, so they don't really know they're kind of being educated.
yeah, like
You
the
know,
medical stuff is
we're
never,
not talking to them.
yeah, like I said, we have the your health. The your health stuff is, like I said, Wendy Braun covers that, but we did one on like black eyes. So it's like get to the science behind what causes a black eye when you get hit. And we have a great picture. This is in the new issue of a kid with boxing gloves on, and he's got a black eye, which we had to digitally add the black eye because you can't for the services that we're on, like Alame and so forth. They don't allow pictures of kids with bruises. Which I understand, which is great, but it's
Yeah,
like, oh,
I
it's like
get it.
let's buy this picture and put a bruise on the kid. But the science of black eyes, how that happens, you know. But just because we have the column with that doesn't mean if someone does it comes up with a great medical or something idea, and we wouldn't do it. I do, and you know, I say this as a person who's been dealing with cancer for 11 months, but the I will say we try to not be too depressing what we talk about medically. It's like there's a lot of grossology that goes into it. We've done columns on snot, we've done columns on earwax and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So sometimes it's an athlete's foot, psoriasis, all the things that kids would be like, ew, but they're interested, and stuff about hair. Yeah, so those things pop up, but if someone has an interesting angle on something like that, I'd hear it. That just because we have that column doesn't mean we couldn't do it. The author interviews are probably locked up though, just because of how much space we have devoted to the regular author interview column.
What
The
do you mean locked up? What do you mean by locked up?
just when Sally does the author interviews, they're usually good 4 pages, and I wouldn't want to do 2 author interviews in a magazine.
Oh, I see. I
And
see.
since it's a regular column, and we don't do reviews, or things that would be seen as endorsements in the kids magazine. Like
Right.
we might talk about. I do a column in Jack and Jill that's true but weird, and we'll focus on the thing. We might talk about the movies as a concept or whatnot, but it's really not laid out as an endorsement so much. The only thing that comes close to that is the spot the difference uh, are usually taken from movies and release that we get permission from that, and it's usually kids movies, like maybe a picture from a Disney movie, and then it's like, can you find the 6 things that are different about this picture and this picture, but we get permission for that, and it's like, you know those things are out there in circulation that we're able to take advantage of.
And lastly, Troy, how do you prefer to be pitched?
I pre
Is an email pitch okay, or is there a process?
I prefer email because it's usually easier. um and I don't object to getting them in the mail. I mean, they get to me when they come in, but there's just a little more immediacy in the email. I have a better chance of reading that, turning it around more quickly.
Okay.
Just like anything, mail accumulates, and so sometimes it takes maybe a few days to go through a thing. But email I read constantly, and it just gets in front of me faster.
Okay.
Um,
Very good.
Now, you said something about not pitching. I'm sure this group is different, and that everybody knows how to write a pitch. But I've definitely gotten emails where people say, "Here's this story. You will pay me this amount of money," and so forth, and that's a good way to just get blocked, because that's
Well, if I'd
well,
known I could have done it that way, Troy.
yeah, no, that's I wrote this story. I literally had the I expect this. And I'm like, I expect you to not hear from me. Um, because you also know right away that that's going to be a difficult person
That's not a professional writer either. It's not
to deal with.
somebody, Yeah, that would be more trouble than it would be worth, I would think.
No, like the guy that pitched the Bangladesh circus article, Lucian, he emailed me. He's like, I'm French. My English is my second language, so of course his English was perfect. All my artist friends from Brazil, they always do that thing. Like, if you watch tennis and Rafael Nadal does the, oh, my English is not so good, and then speaks in perfect English for 20 minutes. My Brazilian friends are like that too. They're like, oh, I'm struggling with my English. I'm like, shut up, come on. Like, but no, Lucian had this great pitch and this really interesting story, and right away it was intriguing. The pictures were great, and
Did the picture sell it?
it helped. I just thought the idea was cool when I read
If
it
if
before
a
I
con-
opened.
if a that which reminds me, Troy, if we can provide photos, do you want us to do that? Do you want us to let you know that we can do that?
Yeah, if it's kind of article that lends itself to original photos, and we'll factor that into the cost, obviously.
I think we're all set here, and this has been absolutely fantastic. If Troy, if you
Oh,
can give us another couple of minutes, we'll see if anybody here has any additional questions for you.
I
Oh, sure.
certainly
Yeah.
do.
Joel, go ahead.
Yeah. Full disclosure, y'all just published one of my articles, the one on Jackson and the healthcare.
Oh,
Um,
right on.
and so I just wanted to compliment Jennifer Bordell was very easy to work with. I hope I hope she thinks the same of me, uh, because then I went ahead and sent her several other ideas. And just to bang my drum, I think she passed some to you, but
Oh, I know that we've got like she's passed quite a few lately from different writers, and I know we've been kicking things around, so I'm sure I'll see it. But I just want to compliment Jen too, and I know that Jen spoke to the group previously,
Mhm.
but Jen is a terrific editor, and I find her very easy to work with. She was the first face of the post for me. My first interview was with Jen, and she's awesome. I can't say enough about her. She's one of my favorite editors I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some great editors and some really bad ones. And she's top notch. So if you get that chance to work with Jen, I think that, like Joel said, she's really good.
she's so good at that. One story I've submitted, she said, actually, this person in this, and that's how the Jackson story came up, um, is more interesting. And so, okay, I, I was happy to take a right turn or whatever. And then, she had good comments and questions then when the first draft went in. And
Yeah.
I think that was fun. And she listened to my suggestions as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have kind of a, I don't know if you call it favored nation system at the Post, but even though I'm like executive editor on the print stuff, when I write for the web, which I do weekly usually, Jen is my editor, and she has the authority for that. And every once in a while, I'll look at a piece and I'll open it, and then they're like, "Oh, that's so much red," but very rarely from but she's all about the punchy,
Mm.
and but no, if she makes a comment, then she has a good reason for it. Um,
Mhm.
and like I said, she's a great friend, great editor.
Sarah?
Well, my son turns 6 on July 8th, so, he definitely qualifies for Jack and Jill. Um, do you find yourselves publishing pieces from a parent perspective, based on parents who have a child like in the age group of Jack and Jill or Humpty Dumpty?
I'd hear it if you had an idea. I mean, that would be, I think the parents would. My assumption is that most, especially Humpty, most parents, are reading it with their kids. Is my just my baseline assumption, and I know that we hear from parents, typically, usually about the submissions of the kid art and so forth. Joel, if you look in the chat, I posted my email.
Yeah, I
And
just didn't see it in the chat here.
oh, um, I'll make sure to post it again.
Okay.
But with that, Sarah, sorry. I like that idea of hearing from the parents. Oh, hang on, let me delete that. I grabbed the wrong thing. Sorry, I got distracted. This happens. Ask my children. Like, Dad, what's wrong with you? But yeah, no, certainly I look at this as a shared experience, particularly in Humpty with parents and kids. We hear from the parents when they send their art in, and we actually hear from parents regarding stuff the kids like. We'll get feedback from parents. We stopped running this one series of older stories that had run, it had a cycle where it ran in the 80s, had a cycle where it ran in the 90s, and they were these stories, and you're gonna all laugh in the John Wick context, but based on Baba Yaga, the witch of Russian legend, there are a bunch of kids' stories of Baba Yaga, and this one little girl wrote in to us and she said, "Those stories scare me." And that's scary. And we said, well, we're just not going to run them anymore because we weren't really big fans of them. We just reread them every once in a while when they had a space. I'm like, well, this little girl in Iowa didn't like it, so I'm not going to run that. I'm going to find something else. But the parents are sometimes clue us in. We recently had, I mentioned the Superstar Kids and Jack and Jill, where we mentioned kids doing interesting things. We had um, she is 20 now. We had a differently abled reader who was still reading Jack and Jill because she grew up loving it and she still loved it. And she would send in art, she would send in her pictures and so forth. And her mom would write on her behalf that, she told us about being in Special Olympics and stuff. And like, why don't we interview her? And so in the August issue that just came out, the Superstar Kid is actually that girl who wrote. So we had that interactivity where the parent had reached out and so forth. I would love it if we had, a parent facing article every once in a while. I think Jack and Jill is probably the place for that. Humpty could be good depending on what it is.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Beatrice, do you have any questions for Troy?
Yeah. I did the subscription, both magazines.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was so tickled because I kept trying to find out how to do the subscription, and then my brain said, "Silly, just keep looking for it on the website." But anyway, I write for children between the ages of 4 and 9, so this hits both categories. Um, what should I do then? Just try to get back over into the 2 to 6, or what should I do?
I think that if you just maybe share the idea, I think that sometimes Brian and I kick those back and forth and think, well, should we steer it this way or should we steer it that way? Sometimes it's on a content need, like a page count need,
Okay.
that we like, do we need some more here? Do we need more there? And maybe we could make it, we usually work with the writer to bend it one way or the other, depending. So if you let me know an idea that we find compelling, I think you'll probably be able to figure out where we should steer it
Okay. One more
if it's on
tiny
the
question.
borderline.
One more tiny question. I note in your guidelines that you choose the person to do the illustrations.
Yeah, we have a big staff of artists that are for original art. If you come to us with photos for a story and so forth, we can use that. You can pitch us if you have original art that you want to do with the story, but we'd want to see that as part of the pitch. But
Okay.
usually the problem is in the past, and this is something I haven't experienced, but Brian has, people will say, "Oh, I can do the art to go with the story," and either it's admittedly not very good, or they'll turn in the story but not the art, and then leaving a time crunch kind of element to it. So
Uh-huh. You
mainly
don't want
because
my Yeah, my stick man. You don't want my little stick man.
Yeah, that would be mine. That as a person who wrote comics, I used to joke that if I wrote and drew it, it would be the Adventures of Stick Man and Circle Boy. But you know,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Troy, are you cool with more than one idea per pitch, or
Um,
do you prefer one at a time?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I prefer one at a time. That doesn't mean that you can't send, two on the same day. Um, I had somebody send me two separately today, and it was nice because they just did it, formatted. It was kid fiction. So it was formatted just as if it were an individual pitch. And I'm like, I glanced at it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I need to read that later. And then the name popped up again, and I'm like, oh, did it double send? Oh no, it was the person sending the second one. And which is cool that they just sent the two like real close together. But it makes it easier for me to read. It makes it easier for me to share. I'm going to send it to Ryan or Andy or someone to see what they think. They don't have to sift through multiple pitches in an email. I said, what do you think of this? And it's just easier.
Okay, wonderful. Does anyone else have any questions for Troy? No? All right. Well, Troy, thank you so much. This
Oh,
was
you're
just
welcome.
absolutely wonderful.
Oh,
I really appreciate the insight, the information you shared with us. I'm sure some of our members are already generating some really great ideas for you. I came up with one, so you'll be hearing from me soon. But I can't thank you enough for the time you spent with us this evening.
oh,
It's important for us, and we really do appreciate it.
you're welcome. This was fun. And Don, real quick, I mentioned something at the very beginning that I never went back to when we were talking about the writing. Um, I recently wrote Marvel Comics for Dummies for a while.
Oh,
For
really?
the Dummies series. And I was going to tell you that, and I forgot when we got I'm like, oh, I never mentioned that to Don. So,
Well, before we started the meeting, for those, Troy was talking about his career writing for the about comic books and for comic books and just that whole thing. So we were sharing that experience. But is that book out or
yeah,
is
it's out, and I'm doing Wiley's doing a whole series, so they have several by different writers. But I did the basic Marvel Comics one, and I'm doing the X-Men one that comes out in December.